The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
In the time of Jesus Christ, there were already several groups who were expecting, predicting the coming of the Messiah. And these groups claim that the Messiah would belong to their group. For one, the essence were thinking that the coming of the Messiah will be preceded by catastrophic events like the banging of the heavenly bodies and so on, earthquakes, storms, natural calamities. And so the best way to prepare for the coming of the Messiah was for them to go to the desert, spend their time in fasting and prayer. And one of their followers was John the Baptist. Another group would be the Zealots, to which Simon Peter the Zealot was a member. This group were thinking of overthrowing the Roman Empire, because at this time the Israelites were under the bondage of the Roman Empire, and they were thinking that the Messiah would be in their mold, a rebel, a political leader that would rally the people, the Israelites, against the Roman Empire. The third group would be the rabbis, the teachers of the law, the scribes and the Pharisees, and they thought that the Messiah would be like them, a rabbi, a teacher. And so when Jesus asked the question, "Who do people say that I am?" the apostles, in unison, had ready-made answers provided by these groups who were expecting the Messiah. Some say, "You are John the Baptist." Others say, "You are Elijah, or one of the prophets of old." But Jesus was not satisfied with ready-made answers. And so he asked his apostles, "Who do you say that I am?" Sino ba ako sa inyo? Anong papel ko sa buhay ninyo? Why? Because Jesus, in calling the apostles or the disciples, was not only providing them information. It's so easy to provide information, to provide knowledge. But Jesus was going beyond providing information, because he was introducing to them a way of life. That's why he said, "I have come to cast fire on the earth, and how I wish the blaze were ignited." A life of service, a life of love, a life dedicated to the service or at the service of others. No greater love than this, than to lay down your life for your friends. And so, Jesus rebuked the apostles, because although Peter answered rightly when he said, "You are the Messiah of God, the anointed one, the chosen one," a general consensus among them was that the Messiah, or Jesus, would be a political leader who would rally the Israelites against the Roman Empire, who would bring back the glory days or the golden days of the Davidic kingdom, when the Israelites were never under a foreign power, when King David conquered all his enemies. But Jesus dosed cold water on such expectations when he said in the gospel, "The Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised." The apostles must have been discouraged, because their expectations were unmet by Jesus. In fact, they were quarreling that when Jesus would assume his role as king of Israel, they were quarreling that one should sit at his right and at his left. But Jesus said, I must suffer and die. So how are we going to follow Jesus? Jesus gave us an inkling, especially for us who are following Jesus more closely as religious, as candidates to the priesthood. I must suffer. You must also suffer. Anyone who wishes to follow after me must forget himself, take up his cross, and follow me. But what kind of suffering? When you are languishing in prison for paying a crime that you have committed against humanity, that's not the kind of suffering that Jesus is talking about. Or when you are languishing on a hospital bed because you have abused yourself with substance abuse like alcohol or drugs, that's not the kind of suffering that Jesus is talking about. Or for example, you're a sportsman who wants to capture the an Olympic medal, like Heidelin, who trained for 16 long years before she was able to capture that golden trophy, gold medal. That's what you call purgative suffering. You have to undergo many trials, strict regimen, like sportsmen, like soldiers, the Navy SEAL, because they want to improve, they want to become better in their trade, to develop their skill. You have to undergo a high degree of body punishment. That's not the kind of suffering that Jesus is talking about, what you call purgative. What Jesus is talking about when he said, I must suffer, the kind of suffering that Jesus is talking about is what you call salvific, redemptive suffering. When you suffer, when you undergo pain, when you undergo trials, when you sacrifice for the other. I have come that you may have life. Jesus said, life in its fullness. When a father sacrifices so much, he goes to the Middle East and worked there for years. That is what you call redemptive sacrifice, salvific. It is life-giving. The father is willing to sacrifice, to be away from his loved ones, because his main purpose is to give a better future, to earn much more to support the family. When a mother is pregnant and she has a difficult pregnancy, the doctor would advise her to do bed rest, to do certain rituals to be able to sustain the living life in her womb. That's what you call redemptive, salvific suffering. She's not suffering because of being punished. She's not suffering because she wants to develop her skill. She's suffering in a way. She's willing to undergo trials, difficulties, just so she would be able to deliver a healthy baby. That's the kind of suffering that Jesus is talking about, just like his suffering on the cross, that we may have life, not only life in this world, but life eternal. And so today, as we have listened to the call of Jesus, we should imitate him. We can only know him more closely in prayer, just as the gospel today reports that he was in constant communication with the Father in order to sustain his strength, in order that he may always do the will of the Father. He always prayed. And so in the same manner, in the same way, we can come to know Jesus more closely not only about Jesus, but a personal relationship with Jesus, because Jesus said, I will no longer call you servants, but friends, because I have revealed to you everything that the Father has entrusted to me. Jesus can reveal himself to us in prayer, in meditation, in reflection. Jesus can reveal himself to us through his word. Man does not live on bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. The more we listen to the scriptures, the more we read the Bible, then we come to know Jesus. Jesus as the one who walked on this earth, the Messiah. And the more we can imitate him. We can also know Jesus through the lives and the examples of the saints, the tradition of the church, the apostolic tradition. That's why when Judas Iscariot was replaced, the only criterion that they followed was someone who knew Jesus personally. The apostles. That's why we call ourselves the apostolic church, because we trace our origin back to the time of Jesus. There is a continuity of experience from the time of Jesus up to our time, which we call the church tradition. There are many men and women who tried to live holiness, ang pagpapakabanal, because of their encounter with the apostles, with the examples of the apostles. The tradition of holiness, the tradition of personal connection of Jesus is preserved through that long line of holy men and women going back to the time of the apostles. Hindi po totoo yung sinasabi ni Presidente Duterte na walang silbi ang mga santo because they live centuries ago. Yung mga santo, yung mga banal, they try to preserve the tradition of holiness, yung pagpapakabanal mula nung kapanahunan ng ating Panginoon Jesucristo, mula nung kapanahunan ng mga apostoles, mga disipulos, hanggang sa kasalukuyang panahon. They continue the tradition of knowing Jesus not only in terms of the intellect or understanding, but knowing Jesus, the Jesus who touched their hearts. It is only when Jesus touches our hearts that we can follow him in a personal way. Dito po sa Pilipinas, 85% are Catholics. Pero kuminsan napakalungkot sapagkat maybe only 40 or half of that are practicing Catholics. Napakarami ang alam nila tungkol kay Jesus. They know about Jesus, but they do not practice the faith. It is only when you know Jesus personally that you can practice the faith sincerely, authentically. How do you know this? A life dedicated at the service of others. When you're willing to undergo pain and suffering because you want to give life, you want to sustain life, you want to make the life of the other person better. Jesus said, I have not come to be served, but to serve and give my life as a ransom for all. A life dedicated to love, a life dedicated to service and caring. That is the kind of suffering that Jesus is talking about in the gospel today. It is our faith in Jesus, the Son of God, which unites us members of this community